Good evening, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Wildcard Devy show. We've got the bunch back again after our first episode last week. We moved on to episode 2. Just before I introduce the guys and ask how the weeks have been, just something I forgot to do last week. Shout out to Mags for the intro there and stuff and everything. I think I shouted out a few of them last week. Neglected Mags, so apologies for that. Even though he has left all our teams off with no players at all, but yeah, appreciate that, Mags. Jack, Phil, welcome, Jack. How's the 2 weeks been since our first episode?
Yeah, good, mate. Lots of iffy weather up in Yorkshire. For those that don't know, all three of us are up Yorkshire way. So even if some of us don't sound it, but yeah, doing well. Dived into some Senior Bowl stuff and even more transfer portal drama in college football.
Yeah, I watched a bit of Senior Bowl as well. It's like that little bit of football that we have in between before the draft and stuff. You just cling on to it and stuff. It's like I say, it's a fun week as well. You know, it's enjoyable, but it goes quickly, and you're like waiting for the draft again. Phil, how about you? How's your 2 weeks been?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. Obviously, the AFC Championship game aside, it's been a good couple of weeks. See, I'm still wearing my colours loud and proud. But yeah, on to next season as far as the NFL goes. There's no game this weekend or anything like that. For me, I took in a bit of the Senior Bowl. Tried to pump the Twitter coverage out, like kind of whilst all that was going on. But I've got a 7-year-old, and he actually, for all the slander of the Pro Bowl and the new format of the Pro Bowl's got, he was absolutely transfixed by the dodgeball and the kind of Pro Bowl skills games. So I had to take a bit of that in with him. I still don't really know how I feel about it, but he certainly enjoyed it, and it was nice to sit and watch it with him and kind of get him involved with it, with something that I love. So.
Yeah, it's I feel the same. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I feel a lot better than the actual game before, because like it just seemed like a game not worth watching. Mostly at a silly time as well and stuff. But yeah, I do feel better about it. But still not sure about it. But that's why we're more college guys anyway, aren't we?
Exactly.
So obviously, the episode 2 for us this week, and we're going to look at the transfer portal and a few players that have obviously moved to better or worse situations. If you've been following college football the last few years, you know that transfer portal is a bit of a crazy thing that they brought into now, where players can move to a team and they're eligible straight away. Than back, I can't know how many years ago it is now, maybe 5, maybe 6. I can't remember what it is now, 4, 5, 6. Where you were transferred and you had to sit out a year, which is crazy to think. It seems that long ago now that you could do that, but yeah. So you get more players transferring around and moving to different teams, different schools. Sorry, and we're going to take a look at a few. There's a lot to get through, but we've just picked our maybe not our favourite ones, but interesting topics from each one. Talk about, and we'll go through each position group. And obviously, we'll start at the quarterback position. And Jack. I'm going to pick. It's a weird one. You have Jack in it because there was some big hype around him last year, and the team has gone to it. It is a bit odd.
Yeah, I've gone for Malachi Nelson as the person I want to talk about, and as you say, he was at USC with Lincoln Riley, and he was dubbed as Caleb Williams' heir apparent. This should be his off season to be taking hold of an electric offense in a team that's moving to a bigger conference. Sorry, Jord. And it just came out of nowhere, really, that Malachi Nelson entered the transfer portal like early December, I think it was. And at that point, I was certainly thinking, this is a 5-star recruit. He was top 10, top 12 overall recruits in the 2023 class. He was the first pick in all of my Devy supplemental drafts last year, and he could have gone to another Power 5 team and looked to take over. So Ohio State were looking for a quarterback at that point. Quite a few big teams were looking for quarterbacks, but he has dropped down to a group of 5 team. He's gone to Boise State Broncos in the Mountain West Conference, and it totally took me, and I think most of the college football world, by surprise. Certainly the Boise State fans are absolutely delighted that they have managed to snag Malachi Nelson out of the transfer portal. And so it intrigues me for a few reasons that he is going to a team where he's going to start. So that's a good thing for Devy. He's only had 3 snaps in college football so far, and only one of those was he allowed to throw a pass on. So we'll get to see a bit more of Malachi Nelson, assuming that he wins that job. He's got a soft schedule, so he should be winning quite a lot next year. The Broncos won the Mountain West last year, and they have a quite easy schedule, in my opinion, going forward. So he's going to be able to light up the field and maybe show a bit of flash and trickery. But it is not a good thing when your Devy asset goes from a top Power 5 team and transfers to the group of 5. It's not something that you want to see. And so I am so torn, because I'm excited to see what Malachi Nelson can do in a pass-friendly offense against weak opposition. But it scares me for his Devy value. And what I hope is that he's going to light it up and maybe then look to transfer again back into the Power 5 once he's established himself as a starter and got into the rhythm of college football.
Yeah, I think that's like the but when I mentioned the transfer portal earlier and stuff, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, it's not a great looking at it like now going to Boise State, but you can obviously. The benefit is obviously you can, if he has a good season, he can transfer back to maybe a Power 5 and find himself in like a good position. But yeah, it's because obviously Malachi Nelson with the other 3 quarterbacks for potentially and stuff and everything. If you throw a few other guys in there, that where they could be separated. I think when I looked at a lot of people's rankings back before, they'd be like Malachi Nelson could easily be 1, 2, 3, 4. There were so many people out there. So to see the other guys, what they're doing, and obviously him to go to Boise State, like I say, if it's one of them now where like if he doesn't perform well at Boise State, then obviously he's going to fall off a cliff. So it's going to be interesting. And I'm not saying I'm pretty confident Malachi Nelson will be there at Boise State at the start of 2024 season, but there is another transfer portal yet to open where guys could move as well and stuff and everything. So it's it's a strange one. I don't know if you had any thoughts on it, Phil, because obviously, like you say, 5-star prospect, but not getting many snaps in year 1, moving to Group 5 is very it's different.
Yeah, without a doubt. It strikes me as a classic example of this new kind of money talking. Just because the Group of 5 doesn't mean that people won't be throwing everything at him to turn his head and kind of make him move that way. But I think you were right. Like a good year at the Group of 5, watching him tear through competition, and then the next thing will be, well, can he do it against a better opponent? And it wouldn't surprise me to then see him move back, like Jack said, into the Power 5, and then test his mettle in his kind of final season, his junior season, perhaps, before looking at then turning his hand to the league.
No, like you say, it's Jack said it's concerning as you look at it now, but it's no. Things can happen later on, going forward, and if you keep holding, like obviously the value is not going to be there if you're looking to like jump off him, so you might just keep holding him and see what's going to come of him after this year, and even if you want to get off for him after that and he transfers to Finger, but that's a long way off going forward. But moving on to a guy that I picked and stuff, someone that I'm like quite high on actually and stuff. I've got quite a lot of shares in him in Devy leagues, and I thought I might be putting him into my NFL teams this year at one point, because he did actually commit to the draft. I looked like he was going to commit to the draft, and came back out and he committed to Miami, and that's Cam Ward from Washington State. I think he's quite one of them Devy darlings and stuff. A lot of people really enjoy watching him. He's not really a pocket passer. Like he can actually make plays with his legs, but he does like to stay in the pocket a lot more than you'd probably think, because like I say, he's really good making plays on his legs. You know, he's fast and stuff, but he just loves playing from the pocket, and he's obviously his stats show that. You know, he's got. I think this season he had, I think 66.6 or something like that percent. You know, completion rate. You know, I know people might say Pac-12, but it was very competitive this year. Pac-12. It was there's some good quarterbacks, some good teams in there, and what's impressed me about him as well over the last 2 years since moving from Incarnate World to Washington State. I think he's thrown about 15 interceptions in 2 seasons, which is pretty good for a college quarterback. He looks after the ball really well, and obviously moving over to Miami now, I hate to say it, but there's probably going to be more eyes on him, you know, moving from the West Coast to the East Coast. He's got an OC in Miami. His name's Shannon Dawson. For people who don't know him, he coached Clayton Tune at Houston when Tank Dell was there, and obviously hasn't gone on to do much in the NFL as it stands, but he was really productive for Houston and really got the best out of Clayton Tune, you know. And yeah, he's I probably, if I were to say, I probably would have think it would have been interesting if he did commit to the draft, because I feel like he could have been. I don't think he might have pushed for the first round, but he could have been a second round guy. But maybe he thinks going to Miami, putting up some amazing numbers over there, like, and with more eyes on him, he can maybe push himself into the first round. You know, the quarterbacks next year look a bit obviously bleaker compared to this year. So yeah, maybe he fancies himself as a first round guy. Phil, like I say, Cam Ward, he was a Devy guy, and a lot of people were looking at him and stuff, like going into like the rookie drafts this year was a sleeper. So have you any thoughts on Cam?
I think he's played a blinder. I think this is a great move for him. The Miami fans, and Mario Cristobal in particular, will be delighted to move on from Tyler Van Dyke. And I think he's got a great opportunity to showcase himself. I think they'll fancy a run at the ACC title this year. And yeah, he like you say, he's in the perfect position to only boost his draft stock in a class that's not looking the strongest. And yeah, I think it's a win-win for him, to be fair. I think it's a great move.
Jack, any thoughts on Cam Ward before we move on to our final quarterback?
Yeah, I was surprised that he was even transferring from Washington State. Like when he went there and started this year and started to get some good reps, and the team, it seems to be on an upward trajectory. So I was surprised when he declared for the NFL, because I didn't think he was going to even get day 2 draft capital. He seemed a million miles away from being an NFL ready prospect. So going to Miami, who need this to work out, Mario Cristobal needs this gamble to work out, I think, to save his job there at the Hurricanes. I think this is a great opportunity for Cam Ward to be a bit more in the spotlight as well. Miami is a huge college for college football and significant in American history. So I think it's a good move for him. I would probably be looking to sell him as a Devy asset now, because I'm not certain it's going to work out for him. I'd rather play it safe with someone like Cam Ward and sell him now if someone's willing to buy the NFL second round, maybe first round hype that could come. But I'm definitely excited to watch it.
Yeah, I think Phil mentioned it on the first episode we did about having your Devy goggles on, and I think he's one of them players for me that's like, it's hard to get off because I kind of like believe in him. I'd like when he came, because obviously I not anymore, unfortunately, but we won't get into that like going forward. But like I was a Pac-12 guy, and when he came over, I was really impressed with him and kind of got on the hype train early on, and kind of had trying to get off it, you know, thinking like exactly what Jack says, as in like, oh, it might be a good time to trade, but when you're in love with someone so much, you've got to try and find that middle ground to like think, is he a guy that you think with rather than showing the love that you've shown for the viewers, is it time to get off him? But the industry love him, obviously, per on free and stuff. He was ranked as the #1 transfer portal quarterback before Julian Sain came in, you know, transferred to transfer portal late. He was #1. So obviously he's highly thought of. So yeah, if you want, it's probably a good time to get some value for him if you don't believe in him, because like you could use stuff like that to your advantage, you know, and probably get a decent return for him. And so the final quarterback, Phil, another one this seems like a really good transfer.
Yeah, I certainly think so. So I thought I'd bring up Riley Leonard, who's moving from Duke to Notre Dame. He's heading there to replace Sam Hartman, who's, you know, after his Senior Bowl kind of week, is now looking very much like a UDFA. But, you know, it's a big opportunity for Leonard. He's had a couple of really, really strong seasons at Duke. You know, in 2022, he's had 2 seasons there as a starter. He's kind of turned around their, you know, what was an awful program. You know, in 2021, he led them to a massive season in 2022. And then last year, you know, hampered by injury. He only played in 7 games last year, but he had a kind of massive opening day win over Clemson, which kind of was huge for him and huge for the program in kind of bringing them back to national prominence. It was the first time they'd been ranked inside the top 25 since the mid-90s. And he was a massive part of it. Ironically, he picked up his injury last season against Notre Dame and then kind of literally hobbled his way to the end of the season. You know, he's for me, like going to Notre Dame, he's got an opportunity to try and boost that draft stock. I think similar to Cam Ward, he's fluctuating depending on who you listen to as to whether he's going to be a day 1 guy, a day 2 guy. And, you know, moving to Notre Dame gives him a great opportunity to put himself in the window to be, you know, and work his way into round 1 consideration. He's fun to watch. He's really fun to watch. That's the kind of other thing for me. He's still kind of viewed, I think, more as a dual threat than an out-and-out quarterback. You know, and he's got things that he needs to work on, no doubt about it. Like he's prone to some ridiculous misses, like that. You know, he'll kind of 2, 3, 4 plays on the bounce. You think this guy's got it. Look at him go, and then he does something crazy. And you think, whoa, where did that come from? You know, he's got to trust himself a little bit more. He has a tendency to kind of hesitate when he doesn't see what he wants to see straight away, which leads to him taking more sacks than he perhaps needs to. But he's in a good place to learn, and he's in a good place to, take those steps. And I think the future's bright for him.
Yeah, he's that's one thing when I've watched Duke over the last few years and stuff. It's just his consistency. He's got the tools to be a good passer at the next level. You know, like, you know, just going through his reads and stuff. It's just sometimes just a little bit off, but like you say, he's in a good place. Like you mentioned, the excitement when you're watching him and stuff, like as a dual threat. You know, he's a big guy, but the way he moves is really, really good. You know, kind of reminds me of like a Russell Wilson, Josh Allen and stuff, like, you know, runner and stuff, where he's like a big bodied guy, but just seems to really get those yards in and make people miss. You know, he's got a bit of an acceleration on him as well, Jack.
I think.
Yeah, he's a big guy, and I really love the landing spot, because we saw last year that Notre Dame can adapt to a pass-heavy quarterback, or Sam Hartman certainly loved to throw the ball more than maybe Notre Dame have done in the last 4 or 5 years. I think Riley Leonard is probably going to be an even better balance for that offense and for what that school want to do. And I think he's in a perfect position to build on where his draft stock was before the injury. I think he was a fringe first round, early second round kind of talent at that point. And I think we were all quite excited to see how the rest of the season went. So to give him 1 more year, I don't think he really had a choice after that kind of injury. He's got to go back to college, and he's got to show that he can get back to that level. And I hope that we get to see that.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something, Phil? Sorry, I jumped on the Jack.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, he's the move to Notre Dame kind of took me by surprise a little bit. I think Jack's right in kind of what he says. Like, it is a really, really good move for him. I didn't realize until I kind of looked up, just a little bit of kind of more information, try and find a couple of stats and things like that. I didn't realize that he's actually a legacy transfer, and that it was a family thing that kind of might have been the kind of final tip in the scales, particularly when you talk about some of the other jobs that were open. Like, I think we always forget for these guys, like that kind of family link and that bond of going back and kind of carrying on that legacy is massive to them, isn't it? And it appears that it's been part of the decision-making process this time.
Yeah, it's a good call. You get, like, obviously just normal recruits coming out of high school where, like, normally if they've got a link to the father or any relation stuff, it seems high percentage-wise that they end up either going there as a recruit or finding their way back there. If it's through the transfer portal, it's always something to watch going forwards. And quarterbacks, like I said, there's many more quarterbacks that have transferred and stuff. They're just like free, like different types of quarterbacks as well, different types of like rounds where you take them in Devy startups and things like that to talk about. But going on to running backs, one guy that will be going very high, Phil, who some people have got him as the number one, who transferred out.
Yeah, I mentioned him when Ali dropped his question for us in the Devy mailbox last time. Like Quinshon Judkins moving from Ole Miss to Ohio State. Jack's kind of fist pumping again. Absolutely delighted at that. Listen, I just felt like we don't talk. Well, I've not talked enough about him, and it's one of my favorite things to do, talk about Quinshon Judkins. I love him as a player. So just to kind of set the table as to why I think this is such a big transfer. He was a first-team All-SEC running back last year, and it just goes to show that he was only a 3-star recruit. So for as good as these recruiting services are, like, they don't always get it bob on. He didn't even crack ESPN's top 300. He somehow snuck out of state past Alabama and Auburn and ended up at Ole Miss. And it just goes to show that people, even the kind of people in the pro game and the college scouting game, they don't get it right first time. He's gone on to be an absolute phenomenon. He's the first player in the SEC since Herschel Walker to score 15 touchdowns or more in back-to-back seasons. He's just racked up records after record after record, and it kind of begged the question, like, why is he leaving? He's got Lane Kiffin there. Ole Miss have done some really good things in the transfer portal themselves. So, like, why didn't he want to stay? And I think it's actually like a really smart business decision on his part. He's rushed the ball like a ridiculous amount of times. In 2022, and he kind of carried it for almost 250 carries. Last year, it was up to 271 carries. And maybe he's just tired of being worked like a dog. Like, we talked last time about like the opportunity to spell him and balance him with Travion Henderson. And I think it might be a really, really smart business decision for him to make that move. If they can spell each other and he can showcase himself being fresh and at his absolute best, he's got the opportunity to really kind of excel his draft stock. It stands to reason he's rushed that many times. Like, everyone will be the first to point out his stats dropped massively last season. He kind of went down from 5.71 yards a carry to 4.2 yards a carry. Like, that is a massive, massive drop in his efficiency on, roughly the same amount of carries. But it's probably because the poor kid was knackered. And I just feel like he's done he's made a great decision moving to a program where he won't be expected to be the guy every down. And spelling him right could just be brilliant for his draft stock.
Yeah, his you mentioned his form and stuff. He didn't help. His offensive line was quite suspect at times for Ole Miss as well. I remember, like, in 2022 was a true freshman. Zach Evans transferred over, and you thought Zach Evans is going to be the main guy for Ole Miss, and then this guy called Quinton Judkins, like you mentioned, a freestyle, came out and kept taking the carries off after about week 4 or 5. I was like, who is this kid? Freestyle guy. But yeah, he ends up being the main guy. But you make good points there with sharing the backfield, like he was the workhorse over there. Jack, since you're the Ohio State guy, how does this, like obviously Quinton Judkins is normally taken, I've seen a few startups this time round and stuff like, and Quinton Judkins seems like the number 1 running back off the board most of the times. How does this affect Quinton Judkins and Trevion Henderson, another guy there, like draft, the Devy stock? Like, is this a big blow for Trayshawn, or is it are we putting too much pressure on it and it's going to be okay?
Yeah, well, from a pure footballing perspective, I am delighted, and I think it is the perfect decision. I couldn't have chosen anywhere better to play his probably final year of college football. Now, I think Quinton Judkins and Trevion Henderson have quite different skill sets. They're both top Devy talents and top NFL prospects, but I think they will complement each other really well. Quinton Judkins is a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier. He, as Phil has said, he's a bit of a bruiser, and he will run through and over linebackers like they're not even there. Trevion Henderson is quicker, a little bit fleeter-footed. He's got a little bit more wiggle to him as well. So I think these backs will complement each other really well in an offense that is looking to run the ball a lot better than it has over the last 2 to 3 years. Ohio State have turned over the running back room, really, with Quinton Judkins coming in. Dallin Hayden is the redshirt sophomore who played 4 games and looked incredible in those 4 games last season. So keeping all 3 of them happy is going to be a task. But I think, like Phil said, that means they're going to share that backfield. That's going to keep some tread off the tires for Quinton Judkins and allow him to still demonstrate his incredible potential and his incredible skill set at a school that's going to be in the national spotlight a lot this year. And one thing with college football changing to a 12-team playoff this season, there's going to be more games. There's going to be more need for a deeper running back room across every school. So I think as long as Judkins and Henderson both knew that they were both going to be sticking around, I think this is a great move. And I don't think there's a downside to Judkins' Devy prospects in the fact that he'll be sharing a room. For college fantasy football, it is a bit of a heartbreaker. And I don't think I'll be taking either of them outside of the 6th or 7th round. But that's just a pain I'll have to live with.
It's like you say, it's great for you. Obviously, you've got Will Howard, another quarterback that transferred out that's come to Ohio State. So it's definitely a team that I'll be keeping an eye on next year. Ohio State, they've got some good offensive weapons there, and you'll be wanting them to get to the playoffs. Otherwise, well, I don't want to say it, but Ryan Day could be under a bit of pressure there, Jack. But I think you'll be fine. I think you will be there. We might as well stick with you, Jack, and move on to another top running back, which was, I don't know if it was a surprise, like that he transferred out, and as soon as he did hit the transfer portal, everyone seemed to know where we're going.
Yeah. No, there was no surprises. It was telegraphed, wasn't it? So Trevor Etienne gave us a great Christmas gift with I don't know if you saw the image going around of the guy whose wife bought him a Florida Gators Trevor Etienne jersey for Christmas. Opened that a couple of days after he had transferred to Georgia, which certainly put a smile on my face over Christmas. But yeah, so Trevor Etienne, if you don't know him by himself, you might recognize the surname. Travis is currently on the Jacksonville Jaguars in the NFL and had an excellent fantasy season, his best by a long way this year. And Trevor has crossed the borderline of one of the fiercest rivalries in college. He's going across the cocktail party from Florida to Georgia. And that takes a lot of balls to make that move. He has gone from a hero to an absolute villain as far as any Florida fan is concerned. But in terms of his Devy prospects, I think this is a really good move. It's Trevor Etienne is going into his junior season, so he'll be in his theoretically final year of college football before he can declare for the NFL draft. He's got incredible vision and patience. He can see the field really well, and he can read his linemen and opposition linemen pretty well, allowing him to find the gaps and make the cuts that he wants to, as well as following, obviously, the playbook that he is given. He's got good footwork as well, but his most impressive attribute is his contact balance. He's not the biggest, certainly in terms of height. He's 5'11", I believe, but his yards after contact, they're just always there. You just see him working through contact and being really, really tough to bring down. And I think he, similar to Quinshon Judkins, is going to go somewhere where he's going to get a little bit less tread on the tires. Now, he wasn't a 3-down back at Florida either. Let's not pretend that he was a workhorse like Judkins was, but he definitely won't be in Georgia either. He's going into Kirby Smart's offense, which is one of the best in college. Let's remember that they were going for a third title in a row this season, and it is a system that will fine-tune Trevor Etienne's running back qualities and skills, and Georgia turns out well-rounded running backs. So if you can see some faults in Trevor Etienne's game, I would say his pass protection is quite severely lacking. He's at the perfect place to fine-tune that and upskill in the areas that the NFL is going to be looking at with eagle eyes. So I think it's a really good move for him. I think he's going to be have some fresher legs. He's going to be successful and effective in that committee because Georgia run the ball really well. They have a really good running game, kind of regardless who the running back is. But then you also look at the pedigree of NFL running backs that they do churn out. You've got Chubb, Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift. Todd Gurley was an absolute fantasy football monster until his knee couldn't take it anymore. And James Cook is coming good at Buffalo, and Zamir White even is he's rostered everywhere. He was winning people some leagues at the end of last season with Josh Jacobs out for a little bit. And I think this is a good move, and I think Georgia is a perfect place for any running back. If they want you, I think you should go.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, you went through the Georgia running backs there. They've churned out some real good ones into the NFL. I think this guy's going to be the next big one with obviously a couple of guys. I think Milton and Dejon Edwards won it. They've obviously left up to the NFL and stuff, but not as the same caliber as the one mentioned. And this guy is in that caliber. When he goes over, he's like you say, they will share the backfield, but there was no doubt anyway, but there's definitely no doubt this guy's going to be the number one who's taking most of the snaps. But you've got Branson Robinson there, and Andrew Paul got injured, didn't he? But I think he should be back for 2024. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he will be back. So they've got a really good running back room there. But yeah, it's do you play Georgia this year, Phil? Do Bama play Georgia? I think they do, don't they?
Oh, we do, and it'll be what it always is. It's a different type of game. I think it's one of those where you can throw a form out the window and just put your tin hat on and go for it and go to war, don't you? And the thing I like about Trevor Etienne is like the reports that from the day that he stepped into Florida, like he already carries himself like a pro. He's surrounded himself with professionals. He trains with his brother and a whole host of NFL stars throughout the off season. And he's got that mindset already. He's got that kind of attitude. He understands what it's about and what it's going to take for him to actually get to the top. And I've no doubt this will be a fine move for him and a pain in the ass for everyone who follows SEC teams.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, and another up there with Quinton Judkins, another one that's top tier running back who will go very high in Devy startups, and definitely a guy I feel like after this season that a lot of people will be wanting to acquire in Devy leagues, before they get into the NFL. So my running back's very, very different, and it can be classed as a homer pick if you want. But I just wanted to shed a bit of light on some and a different way, especially if you're in deeper leagues. And it's Jonah Coleman. A lot of people probably won't know who he is. He's moved from Arizona to Washington, followed Jed Fish up from there and stuff and we'll be playing in the Big Ten, so he'll have a lot of eyes on him on next year. He's another one who was only a 3-star running back, and this is going into his junior year, but he's improved over the last 2 years, and I think he ended up with 800 yards. But what was really impressive and stuff, he didn't have he wasn't he had the most carries, but he shared the backfield. But he was by far the best running back. I think he was averaging 6.8 yards a carry, which is pretty impressive for a running back. I think Phil, I mentioned the bruiser. This is what he is, but he's not going to kill you with breakaway speed, but he's got good agility. He can wiggle, get out of tight situations and get those gains. And what's really impressive about him is he always seems to get positive yards. He never really gets knocked backwards. He'll always get you 3 or 4 yards, and that seems to be worst case. But I brought him up because he's one of them where we mentioned tactics last week, and if you're in deeper Devy leagues where you've got 6 rounds plus Devy's, people like this is what I like to target. Later running rounds who look like they've got the NFL size. This guy is he's 5'9", 225 pounds, which is what I like in a running back. Everyone might feel a bit different, but yeah, it's a really good size, especially if you've got a bit of speed and agility. And so if you can target people like this, pick your wide receivers, pick your quarterbacks early. People like Jonah Coleman are really good pickups later, because what's good about running backs is they will usually, most of them find a home in the NFL, and we've seen this year where you've got people, undrafted free agents, people going in around 6 and 7 in the NFL draft that can come onto a team and do a job, and sometimes stick it out and end up having a start job going forward. So, yeah, obviously it was a bit of a home pick as well, just to throw him out there and stuff. But yeah, it's just, I wanted to bring it up just to target running backs later. If you are in deeper ones, there's plenty of other guys out there as well. But this guy is one that's getting a bit of a buzz, from other people in the community as well. I think this year has really stepped up, and people look at him, and I say, with the college realignment going on in the conferences, he's going to get a lot more eyes on him this year. And we saw, obviously, like I say, it's different. With DeBoer going to Alabama, it's different. But obviously, what they did this year with the running backs, they put more eyes on him. But I think this guy could be. I planted my flag on him early, and so I think he could be a bit of a star going forward. After this season.
It's a case of loyalty is dead, but long live loyalty, as he ditches Arizona, but he follows his coach. And I think that is key for him, that he's going along with his head coach from Arizona. He knows what kind of system is going to be played, and he's probably going to be the main guy, even though he's walking into a backfield, into a running back room. There are still a couple of pieces there, but he's probably going to be the alpha in that room.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting. You said, Jord, some people like to target running backs later rather than kind of going for the studs. You can find running backs who get drafted day 2, day 3. And I've not seen loads of Jonah Coleman, but one of the players that immediately jumps to mind, and people who only watch the NFL might go, oh, right, okay. But he reminds me of an Alex Mattison. And when you go back and watch what Alex Mattison did in college, you're right, that yards after, the kind of yards he makes after contact and grinding out those difficult runs is what got him picked up by the Minnesota Vikings. And, that is exactly the same kind of pathway and trajectory. You could see a player like Jonah Coleman, landing on a roster in the hope that if he gets the sniff of a job, he can make it his own.
Yeah, I think that's what I think. Sometimes like people want to go for the flashy 5-star guys and stuff, which rightfully so, especially if they haven't stepped foot on a college field. You know, you want to draft these guys in the hope of that they'll do something. But like you say, you mentioned Quinshon Judkins was a 3-star guy that no one knew. No one would draft him when he first came into the league. But like obviously, once you've seen a few, you know, you've seen a bit of him on the field, it's like people that you might want to pick up. And also, you don't even have to maybe like pick him up if you think you can like wait until later on. But like if you really believe in a guy, you believe in your gut, go pick them up before they get to the rookie draft, because if they do have a good year, especially in the junior year, if they do have a good year, then everyone's going to be on them and stuff and everything. So you've probably missed your chance. But yeah, it's just something I wanted to highlight, like going forwards. And wide receivers, a guy, Jack, who doesn't need much highlight. All his out of the 2022 recruiting class, there was 2 guys, wide receivers, who were neck and neck. I'd say, you know, something like you swing either way. But this guy transferred out is definitely one of my favourites.
Yeah, this is low-hanging fruit to choose to talk about. Evan Stewart. I mentioned him on the last podcast, but I mean, everybody is talking about him and has been since he entered college, because he was such a high recruit for Texas A&M, and he has played really well at Texas A&M and shown what he is all about, despite some chaos in the coaching ranks as he's been there, some chaos in the booster room and everything that comes with Texas A&M football. And he has transferred to Oregon, to an offense that we have just seen really take massive strides forward in the last 2 years, to give them credit. And I think it's a really fun move for Evan Stewart, and really positive one for his Devy stock. I don't think that Connor Weigman and the Texas A&M offense suits a superstar wide receiver in the same way that Dan Lanning's offense at Oregon is going to. Troy Franklin is getting huge buzz for the 2024 NFL draft, with lots of mocks taking him in the first round in the top 15 picks. But he wasn't someone who had that kind of caliber 2 years ago. And I think that Dan Lanning's system really lends itself to highlighting the strengths of a wide receiver. Now, there's an asterisk to this, in that you would love the wide receiver to be going into a system where the quarterback is already established. But Evan Stewart is going to have fellow transfer Dylan Gabriel throwing him the ball. Now, I don't really have any doubts that Gabriel can pick up the Oregon offense, and he is a 3-year starter. He is a confident guy. I think he is a very talented quarterback. So I don't have any really high concerns that this won't work out because of the quarterback. But it will be really great if it does work out and they both gel really quickly in a new offense, in a new school, but under a really well-established offensive scheme.
Yeah, what like I say, I was quite high on Evan Stewart when he first came out, but what impressed me, especially last year, was when Connor Weigman went down, injured after like game 3 or 4. He's still like, even though it was a struggle for the offense, like you mentioned, you know, with the quarterbacks from Max Johnson and things like that, he was still like the main guy, you know, like, which was impressive, especially throws where like underthrown and stuff. He seemed to like, because he's not the tallest, not the biggest like wide receiver and stuff, but his contested catches still looks really good. Like he's got elastic arms. Somewhere he comes down with the ball, it's really impressive. But like I say, he's going to go into a you know, a team, you know, with Dan Lanning, who's really knows how to run that offense and stuff, you know. So it's going to be. I think it's a good move. I can't see how it fails over there. To be honest with you, I don't know if you're in agreement with that, Phil.
I've got nothing more to add. I love him, and you know, again, you talk about smart decisions where you're just going to get the opportunity to. I don't think he's got a great deal left to have to showcase, right? But he's going to go there fill that gap that Troy Franklin's left. He's going to get plenty of target share. He's going to get a chance to really, really put himself out there and see what he can do to separate himself amongst that kind of cluster of that top 2 or 3 in that class with Tet McMillan and Luther Burden. They're all going to carry that chip and think they're the number 1 guy. And I think he's going into a really good situation to let him showcase his kind of claim for that title.
Yeah, I'm hoping, you mentioned Tet McMillan, I'm hoping I could have used him to transfer to Washington, but he decided to stay at Arizona annoyingly. Not for Jed Fish, but we'll leave that one. Moving on to my pick for wide receiver, it's Matthew Golden, who transferred out from Houston to Texas. And this is interesting for a couple of reasons, really. Obviously, it were a 4-star recruit from the 2022 class. I think he was top 25 receiver, maybe 25, 24, like in most recruiting sites. So he wasn't someone that was like massively on the radar, but then I remember a lot of people like mention him on social media, like a lot of Devy sites were mentioning him. So obviously a lot of people go, oh, let's have a look at Matthew Golden. He's been getting a lot of mentioned. And he looked like someone that's like he could be a guy going forward. I took him in a few leagues, but it was like 10 rounds, like later on in 8, 9, 10 region, because it's a 4-star guy, take a chance on him. And his true freshman season, he put up decent numbers, 584 yards, and that were alongside Tank Dell when Tank Dell were there, and he had like 1,300 and stuff. So it wasn't a bad true freshman season. Struggled last year, still managed to put up decent numbers, but struggled like when Clayton Tune went off to the NFL. I think it was Donovan Smith, struggled under the offense there. I think they were ranked in the lower half with yards per game, but still put up decent numbers. I think he had a bit of a drop off, but not. I think like 100, 200 less than 500 last year. But what's interesting about Matthew Golden, obviously, he's going to go over to Texas. Steve Sarkisian offense, and we've seen what the guys that have come out to the NFL this year. Xavier Worthy was there as a recruit, but obviously A.D. Mitchell, who came from Georgia, has had a really good year this year, being able to showcase. Obviously had an injury last year at Georgia, but the year before didn't look like he felt like he maybe needed to move to somewhere like Texas to showcase what he can do as a wide receiver, and obviously he's done that brilliantly. And we've seen what guys are talking about him as like a second round guy, but could see himself like there is talk going in the first round. I'm not sure about that, but just the talk in general just shows you what he's done for his draft stock. And I think, like I say, Matthew Golden, it's a really good move there. Quinn Ewers staying there as well, established quarterback. We think that's what it's going to be. I know Hatch Manning's there, but it just feel like Quinn Ewers is still going to be the guy unless we see something going forward where it changes. But going into a solid room, that there where a lot of wide receivers, Sanders has gone the tight end, so there's enough there for him to really propel his Devy stock, have a good year at Texas. Phil, and I know as an Alabama, you don't want to talk much about Texas, but it's there.
No. Not particularly. No, listen, I think it's a good move for him. It's a smart move. I think he's really, really underrated as a kind of red zone target. Like when you watch his kind of deep shoulder fades and things like that, he's a talented guy, and he's a weapon that Quinn Ewers can really utilize as they kind of get closer to the goal line and around the red zone. He's got some versatility. He didn't do it loads at Houston, but he can line up inside or outside. I don't think it'd be unrealistic to see him kind of getting some jet sweeps and fly motion type things going on as well. He's good in that facet of the game, and he's just an interesting wrinkle for them to add. They're another team that are losing big time talent in Worthy and Mitchell. And, it needs replacing. And between Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, they've done a good job of restocking that room.
Yeah, like I say, they've done really good job. They've got Isaiah Bond as well, which you forget about, which we could have easily talked about, him moving over there. Anything to add there, Jack, on Matthew Golden?
Yeah, the main thing for me is that wide receiver room or that receiving core. And I'm actually quite devastated that all of these guys have decided to go to Texas. Like, great for Texas. Probably good for someone like Matthew Golden, who offers something a little bit different to maybe who's already in the room. But I absolutely adore Jonty Cook. And with Isaiah Bond coming in, I think Amari Niblack has gone across from Alabama as well. Silas Bolden, who I think is quite underrated, coming over from Oregon State. I think that room is quite crowded. So I am nervous maybe for all of the receiving core in Texas. But I think this is a great move for Matthew Golden. I think there are a couple of them that are going to really regret transferring to Texas, though.
I think the next guy who's it's a very good move, I think, into a stable offense and stuff, with the next guy, Phil.
Yeah, listen, this is so on brand for me to talk about this player. He's one of my absolute favourites in all of college football. Antoine Juice Wells. He's moving from South Carolina to Ole Miss. He's going to go join Lane Kiffin in Oxford, and I think it's a smashing move for him. I just kind of like, we talked, didn't we? And I know you've already mentioned it tonight, Jordan. We mentioned it on the last show about your kind of Devy lenses. Sometimes you just fall for the story as well, and like just to set the scene. Like imagine finishing high school like with your hopes of playing football and not receiving a single scholarship offer anywhere. And thinking, right, okay, what's next? Like, so many people at that point would have just stopped. But he ended up playing at Fork Union Military Academy, like out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, because they had a football scholarship. And it was like that kind of one hook and that one chance he had to kind of stay involved and, keep that dream alive, so to speak. And obviously, it soon became apparent that he was far too good for that standard of football. And his next stop was James Madison and the FCS. And he absolutely tore it up. He was an absolute beast at that level in 2021. Even then, so it's, we're going all the way back to 2021. He's an older prospect. But he broke all the kind of school's single season records in any kind of major receiving category at JMU. And it was clear, like, and this I suppose is where the transfer portal is kind of really key in the changes that have been made over the last couple of years, like for players like Wells, because there was then that opportunity for him to move to the SEC and kind of put his skill set on a grander stage and kind of really show off how far he's come. And he had a great year in 2022. The step up didn't look big for him at all. He became kind of Spencer Rattler's go-to guy, and he almost cracked 1,000 receiving yards in that first season, as well as scoring 6 touchdowns. And I was super convinced that he was going to be up there this year in that conversation with your Malik Neighbours, Roma Dunzes, in that kind of first batch of receivers, because I'm absolutely sold on him and his skill set. And then he just had a season absolutely ravaged by injury. Niggles, Knox, and then, eventually he succumbed and they kind of shut him down for the season. And he declared early that he was going to return to college. He kind of said, I think it was mid-November, he said, listen, I'm coming back one more year. And it was just a matter of where. And with Spencer Rattler moving on, I think he decided it would be a good opportunity for him to move too. And so he's going to go play in Oxford for Lane Kiffin. And I think it's a great move for him. Between him and Trey Harris, I think they've got a couple of nice receivers this year. I really want him. I'm so sold on the story. I'm so sold on him and his skill set. He's kind of, as a long-time Baltimore Ravens fan, he's the exact type of receiver we've never been able to draft. Like, in recent years, you can talk about your Hollywood Browns, you can talk about Zay Flowers, who's had a great first year. We have never drafted well that kind of alpha, proper, stereotypical X receiver, that big kind of contested catch guy. And he's just like, for me, like he's the pinnacle of like what we should be kind of trying to draft. And I just hope that he gets his shot this year. I hope he stays injury free because he can't have a lot of eligibility left. And I hope that he gets the draft capital and lands in the league somewhere that will, value his skill set.
Yeah, it's like you say, you mentioned Spencer Rattler there. Obviously, with him moving in, he probably had one eye thinking, as like you say, as an older guy, not ridiculously old, but like an older with not many years left. Where can I situate myself to put my stock going into the NFL draft next year as obviously as far up as I can, and obviously settle in a place like Ole Miss. Like I say, we've settled quarterback in Jackson Dart. Settled coaching staff there, settled like I say, you've got Trey Harris there, you've got Jordan Watkins. It's a good room to be in, and I think he's going to get his fair share of tags. Like I say, touch wood, he stays injury free, and he can really like boost his stock because he is a talent.
I mean, he had that tiny sniff of action against Georgia this year, where like he'd kind of been warming up to that point. He'd missed a couple of games, and they played him against Georgia. And early on, South Carolina kind of blew the doors off the Bulldogs. Like Georgia were a little bit taken aback, like, whoa, we weren't expecting this. And you go and find it on YouTube. Like his touchdown in that game just showcased everything he's about. And that was his last play of the season. Like he went off after that play, like clearly aggravating whatever injury it was he'd been carrying. And that was it. They shut him down from there. But if you just kind of want to see like what the guy's about, that play was something special against arguably the best defense in the country.
Jack, before we move on to a new segment, is anything you'd like to say about Antoine Wells, or has it all been covered?
I think it's all been covered. He's someone that maybe if you're new to Devy, you've probably not heard much about him because of his history of not being recruited and being at smaller schools. But like Phil mentioned earlier, this is a really good business decision. He's putting himself in a great position to get some more eyes on him, to go into Lane Kiffin's pass-happy offense with a quarterback who's really comfortable and talented. Like I really like Jackson Dart. So wheels up for Juice.
So moving on to our last little segment, it's something that I've introduced that we'll do going forward to avoid trademark complications. We've called it a little bit something different. Instead of a famous website, it's called Sell, Keep, Acquire. So we're all going to pick a player which it can be this. We can all be sell one week if we wanted to, but we've all picked players, and we'll start with you, Jack. How are you going about this?
Yeah, so I didn't realize we could have the same. So I was left with Keep because I was obviously last to prepare. But that is absolutely fine because Quinn Ewers is the player that I will be keeping hold of. I think I can say that and not infringe copyright. So Quinn Ewers is someone who, as a stock, he is someone that you want to hold. When you talk about Devy stocks, as Phil mentioned really well last time, this is someone who you have to take all the emotion out of and think about where is his value. And his value is nowhere near where it was when you picked Quinn Ewers, because you will have picked Quinn Ewers with first, second, or third pick in your Devy draft because he was the highest rated quarterback prospect ever. And he went to Ohio State and then Texas, and the buzz just never died throughout his first year and a half of college football because he didn't play any, and your stock can't really go down when you're not playing if you're that talented a prospect. But it's also, his stock has dropped from there since playing, and I think some of that is to do with his mechanics, and some of it is majorly due to his injury that he had that made him miss a good chunk of last season. Now, I definitely want to hold Quinn Ewers stock because Texas do look, and you'll hate me for saying this, They look like they're back. And under Sarkisian, in a system that really favours the quarterback, in a quarterback room where there is competition from Arch Manning, but not really a threat, I think that's the perfect kind of, that's what you want from a quarterback room. You want to be the guy that's being pushed by the guy behind you, knowing that actually this is still your room, which I think is the case for Quinn Ewers. I don't think Arch Manning is going to challenge for the starting job this year, whatever the coaches say in spring. With a 12-team playoff, with Texas moving to the SEC, there is so much buzz around Texas football and therefore Quinn Ewers. And I think his stock is going to keep going up and keep going up, even in the offseason before he plays a snap. And I looked at Texas' opening schedule. So bear in mind, they've gone to the SEC, which is supposed to be the toughest conference. And therefore, this is going to be a baptism of fire for Quinn Ewers. But he has Colorado State, Michigan, who obviously national champions, but they are not going to be that same team. They don't have their coaching staff is getting stripped, and their players have gone to the NFL. Texas play UTSA, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State. That's a really nice start to your first season in the SEC. Then they have Oklahoma, who I think Texas will beat. Then they get Georgia at home. They get Florida at home, and they get Kentucky at home. Their three toughest games on the schedule, they get all at home. And I think this is just going to bring more eyes on Quinn Ewers. And so his stock could go either way. He could go up, he could go down. And so I am holding him. And if he has a great first 6 games of the season, I'll sell him then. If he has that game against Georgia and he shows some promise like he did this year in the big games, then his stock is going to shoot real high in a quarterback class that has just so many question marks over it. He could easily be the first quarterback taken in the 25 draft. So I'm holding him for now, but I'm looking to sell.
Yeah, cheers, Jack. I think before we move on to Phil, I think it's a bit similar to Spencer Rattler, where he's obviously dipped off, and you thought, well, I might as well hold him because I'm not really getting much for. It's probably a great time to sell him if you want to get off him now after his exploits at Senior Bowl. So yeah, it could be a similar thing to that. Phil, I obviously did not tell you the rules either that you could have the same thing, but so we've all gone for something separate. But next week we can do what we want. So who you chose, Phil?
No worries. Well, I mean, listen, I made this really bold claim kind of November time on our X feed. And people didn't quite come at me with the pitchforks, but it definitely raised some eyebrows. I'm selling Nicholas Singleton, Penn State running back. Listen, the likelihood is you drafted him high, right? I get it. And he touted as this absolute phenom, and he was going to be Devy RB1 for all 3 years that he was a college player. He was going to be out in 3 and into the league, first round running back, which obviously is quite a rare commodity these days. And right now, he doesn't even look like, never mind 2025's running back one. He doesn't even look like running back one on his own team. And again, we talked about the drop-off with Quinshon Judkins earlier. The drop-off between year 1 and year 2 for Nicholas Singleton was massive. He's gone from 1,061 yards on 156 carries at 6.8 yards per clip to 752 yards on 170 carries, down to 4.4 yards. It's a staggering drop-off. Like, all that time, he's not been the workhorse that Judkins was. He's been spelled with the very talented Katron Allen. It was a real coup for Penn State to get the pair of them at the same time, because you've got this physical kind of specimen in Singleton. You've got the kind of well-rounded back that came from IMG in Katron Allen. And they were supposed to complement each other, and to a certain extent they do. But whereas Singleton's efficiency has dipped massively. Kieran Allen has remained dynamic. He's averaged 5.2 yards per carry both seasons, and it just screams to me right now, like particularly when you watch the tape on Singleton, like, yeah, Penn State's O-line last year was awful, but there's only so many times I can watch a prospected and a touted like day one running back run into the back of his own offensive line. Like, he seemed to have real like issues with which gap am I taking? Like, what is the lane I'm going for? And yeah, listen, like, anybody watching this, if you have Nick Singleton, you are at an advantage because you're watching this, like, and you're going to hear this advice. Sell him high. Like, your league mates who aren't quite as invested as you will still pounce on the name value. And I think this is an ideal time to get out before his stock can take a hit next year. Because, I mean, right now, you've got Travion Henderson coming back. You've got Quinshon Judkins. You've got Trevor Etienne that we've mentioned. You've got his own teammate, Kieran Allen. I think they are 4 guys in the same class potentially in 2025 that I'd rather have than Singleton at the moment. And then you've also got another batch kind of creeping up behind them who are going to be looking to build on big seasons this year. Your Amarian Hamptons, Ollie Gordon, Damian Martinez. They're all like kind of primed and in a position where if he struggles again to take over in terms of kind of rankings, perhaps. So yeah, like get out on the name value now, sell him and get that kind of high value before it's got a chance to take a turn for the worse. I've got no doubt he'll make the league, but I don't think he's going to be that superstar that everyone was touting.
Cheers, Phil. Yeah, it's really interesting because, like I say, it was a really high draft pick early, and it looked like it was going to work out for him early on, but it's did. But if you do feel like that, it is a good time to sell. I think where I've gone with it, I've gone a different way with the guy I picked. I've gone to acquire Connor Weigman from Texas A&M quarterback. You've got to think now, like with all the new quarterbacks coming in from the 2024. Recruiting class, a lot of eyes are on them. The excitement of these guys, like picking them up. People in the past, like if they haven't been up to scratch, of like kind of like being thrown in the even though I was still 20, 21 years old, still thrown in the scrap heap. We've got these new shiny quarterbacks coming through, and obviously Connor Weigman from the 2022 class. He's kind of lost the 2022 class, like. Of what it was. Cade Klubnik has not worked out at Clemson whatsoever. It's not looking good. Obviously, Drew Allara at Penn State has looked really, really good, but then them games against Michigan and Ohio State have put a lot of question marks. And even in the Rose Bowl against Ole Miss, it's put a lot of question marks. Like for him, but Connor Weigman is obviously question marks there, but. Played a few games in his true freshman season. He had one start against Ole Miss where he looked really good. Started last season for the first time, as a starting quarterback. Got injured in week 4 where he looked like it wasn't like he was like seen as like, oh, this guy's going to be brilliant. But there were some flashes in the pan of good stuff, but also a few question marks. But before he got time to like really pick up head of steam, he was injured. So I feel like he's still going to be in there. Maybe not fully on the scrap heap with the others, but he's still, people probably might want to get off him. And I think I'm always like one of them people who are looking at any player, not just quarterbacks, where it's like a low risk, high reward. Where if you can get him for a trade, with relatively cheaper than what he was before. With the chance of him rising his draft stock this year, I think it's worth a swing. You know what I mean? It's not saying he's definitely going to hit, but there's enough out there to show that there is quarterbacks that have done that. So if you can buy him low, where some people won't want to still let him go, it's not everyone's going to sell him low. But if you can get hold of him, I think there's a good chance for a good year. There's a new head coach over at Texas A&M. You've got Colin Klein, OC, coming from Kansas State, who did a great job with Will Howard, who's gone to Ohio State. Kansas State, one of the best, highest offense. I think they were like top 25 offenses over the last 2 years with Colin Klein. So another a good pointer up for Conor Wyman if he can stay fit this year. But I think the main thing for me why I've chosen him is just that low risk, high reward where you probably might not have to give up much and it could come good. And if it doesn't, you haven't given up much, and you can move forward. But yeah, that's one guy I'm looking at, especially with the quarterbacks in that class. And we'll talk about the shiny new toys going forward, next week. But yeah, brilliant guys. I've really enjoyed that as usual. It's we're a long wait, but I feel like the 2-week wait is just pumps you up more to talk about football. I don't know how you feel about that.
Absolutely. Let's do it again in a fortnight, shall we?
Yeah, definitely. I think we did decide that we were going to talk about the new shiny toys, didn't we? We'll start with the quarterbacks next week, which, like I say, Phil's done a fantastic job of running a few down on I keep calling it Twitter, but I don't know how we feel about that, guys. We keep calling it Twitter or X, but yeah, on social media, he's run a few great threads there on him. But we'll go into detail on them. Jack, Phil, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Cheers, Gerald.
Yeah, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Yeah, appreciate you for listening, and we'll see you soon.